This is an important message for any people of faith or anyone who's worried about what's happening in the world today and what they can do about it. So at the moment, there's a lot of serious global conflict happening. A lot of us think maybe we've entered World War III, and you're probably right if that's what you're thinking. I don't want to speculate on the outcomes of how this is going to play out, who's going to win, and how it's related to Bible prophecy, even though I think it is related to Bible prophecy and there's a lot of significant things happening. But there's simply too much to cover, and a lot of what I would say is just simply speculation. But if you want to talk more in depth about this, go ahead and shoot us an email. We'd be happy to discuss these things with you, maybe about how this is actually related to potential prophecies being fulfilled, particularly the fact that Israel has now emptied out the Dome of the Rock, or the temple where the future site of Solomon's third temple is going to be, which is where the Antichrist is going to reside. I don't know. Again, a lot of this might just be speculation, but there are significant things happening, so I think it's a good moment to self-reflect. So a lot of people are worried. I don't want to worry you, and I don't want to instill fear, on the contrary. But I do think we need to take a cold, hard look at reality, especially if you're in the US at the moment. Similar to how COVID ended up changing a lot of things and affecting us in a lot of significant ways, even unto this day, this current global conflict might do something similar. So it's a very good time to think about what your options are and what you might do in the future, considering some possible major changes. Well, while praying about this issue the night that the US and Israel attacked Iran and bombed them, I felt I got the words from God which said, "Those who live by the sword die by the sword." Now that's pretty obvious, right? Anyone who's violent is likely to meet a violent end. People who take power by force eventually will be, unseated of their power by force. However, when I looked up the reference, I remembered that Jesus didn't say this to the centurion. He didn't say it to the empire or a soldier or someone who was living by violence. He said it to his closest follower, Peter. So Peter took up arms, who wanted to defend Jesus, protect him by violent means. And Jesus said, whoa, hold on. My kingdom is not of this earth. If my soldiers and my kingdom was of this earth, yeah, sure, they would be violent just like everyone else is. But that's not what I came here for. This was a really important lesson for Peter. Totally revolutionary lesson for him, and it's very important for us today. So today, the world, and particularly in the United States, people are more and more divided than ever, particularly along political and cultural lines. Left, right, conservative, liberal, there's a whole lot of confusion happening at the world, and I'm sad to see a lot of people who identify as Christians taking one side over the other. Because remember, friends, the reality is it doesn't really matter who's governing or who wins what war. The reality is that the most violent, the most corrupt, the most vile are likely to take power. They're the ones that are going to win and rewrite history. Now, I know what you may be thinking. You may think, well, in the Bible, Israel conquered many places by force, and they went into violent wars and God blessed them. Well, you really have to think about the foundation of that thought. The reality is that God never wanted the kingdom of Israel to have a king. He didn't want them to be a kingdom. He wanted to be their king. But the people of Israel wanted, they wanted a king. They wanted to be like the other countries. They wanted, power and prestige, just like many of us want that same thing today. And God said, look, the prophet said, that's just going to bring you a lot of problems. You don't really want that. There's going to be corruption involved. But, they went for it. They got a king. And then to this very day, people are still thinking that the kingdoms or the governments of mankind are the solution to humanity's problems. And that's not the case. In many cases, they're the source of the problems. Our faith in the materialistic kingdoms of this world, or governments, or powers that be, is a lot of the confusion that's happening right now. Do you really think that God supports the massacring, the killing of innocent civilians? He doesn't. He doesn't. The reality is that Satan is the one in charge of this world. He's the one leading. It doesn't really matter who wins, because in the end, through all this chaos, through all this confusion, through all this fighting, whatever side you take, he's going to end up coming out on top. So sooner or later, through all these problems, these violent conflicts, he's going to end up revealing himself for who he is, and people are going to give him power because they're going to want someone to take control of all the chaos that's happening soon. He's going to bring peace, but that peace is not going to last long, because true peace doesn't come from any political or material solution. True peace comes from within. It comes from submitting to the only true king that there ever was, the only legitimate ruler, who is King Jesus. All the others are just phony imitations. So don't fall for the lies. There are no righteous wars. God's kingdom, friends, is at hand. But first, prophecy's got to be fulfilled. We've got to go through this suffering. Nation will rise against nation, and these prophecies will eventually be fulfilled. But let go of these worldly loyalties. Stop thinking in materialistic terms. It's all vanity. So I'm just going to close with one last thought. There's a great deception coming, and I think a lot of people have already been deceived, as more and more people get divided on these kind of minor issues. But the devil's wise. He's wise because he's been around a long time, and he knows the best way to manipulate you and the best way to manipulate me is through our wallets. Because Jesus says we can't serve two rulers. We can only either serve God or we can serve mammon. And mammon is basically money, the god of money, which is the god of this world. So if you're worried about your finances right now, for example, things happening with inflation, what might happen with the global economy, well, it's a good time. Good time to be thinking about your finances. Now is the best time to invest. And I'm not talking about investing in gold and silver. I'm talking about investing in the only thing that matters, and that's in God's kingdom. So Jesus gave us a roadmap. He said, if you want real treasures, build them in heaven, because in heaven, no one's going to take them away from you. This global conflict could mean the end of a lot of different people's finances. It could trigger a global economic crisis. We're not sure. I don't want to speculate on a lot of that. But just think, if that does happen, what are you going to do? Think about your life and everything that you've lived for up until this very moment. What are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? If all your material endeavors were taken away one day to the next, how would you feel? Would you feel you still lived a meaningful life? Or would you feel like this is all meaningless and worthless? Because if all you've been pursuing up until now is just better economic status, well, that comes and it goes. Everything can change tomorrow. So if you're serious about this, if you're thinking about what I'm saying, you're considering your options, reevaluating what's happening and how things might affect you and what really matters, well, go ahead and shoot us an email. Write to us today. Let's get in contact. Let's help each other out while we still can, because there's dark days coming. Thanks for listening.